So, hey everybody, it's James Governor here from Redmonk. I'm co-founder of the company. We're the developer-focused industry analyst company. And today, I'm having a conversation about some interesting technology and some interesting opportunities for enterprise customers. I'm talking to Rosalind Radcliffe from IBM, who works in and around System Z. And maybe she can explain a bit about her role, and then I'll say a bit about what we plan to talk about today.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here. So I'm responsible for driving DevOps for enterprise systems. So bringing those open source tools, that modern capability, that cloud native development to the traditional IBM Z platform, so that it doesn't matter if you're doing COBOL or PL1, it's all one way of working, as well as working with our clients so that they can do their DevOps transformation, including IBM Z.
Okay, great. So let's sort of start with a very 2020 story. One of the things I've been thinking about, one of the scenarios, has been very much about the sort of velocity required to modernize our applications. A good example would be sort of curbside pickup, where retailers, if we think about 2019, it's a nice to have. 2020, it's essential. I believe that there was a mainframe example of needing to update some systems, a System Z example that put COBOL back on the map again. So what was that about?
So there have actually been a number of stories about COBOL, and in many ways, the way the stories are told are more to blame COBOL as an excuse than what the reality was. But it boils down to COBOL is running many of the world's systems. And when this instantaneous need came to be able to do things differently, and the scale, many of our government systems are running COBOL, and the scale that hit the systems, all of a sudden, the companies didn't have the processes and practices in place to be keeping those systems up to date. So despite the fact they had new hardware and they had good systems, they hadn't worked on their applications. And so they suddenly realized, this COBOL matters. And they needed to do work from a transformation standpoint of a ways of working so that the COBOL could scale the way they needed it to and provide the services they needed.
Okay, so I think there's two issues there to unpack that I'm really interested in. So as long as I've been in the industry, there has been System Z. The mainframe has been frankly part of the industry and part of my life for as long as I've been around in the business. And I think there are two separate things here, because of course one thing that people don't understand is how much development that IBM has done in modernizing the platform. So I can use Z Linux, I can use Linux running on a mainframe. I can run, if I want to run MongoDB or Redis or any of these modern systems, that is all supported. The hardware is modern. It is highly performant. So folks that have invested in their hardware infrastructure or in their systems infrastructure are getting all of these goodies. And that's something I think that people don't always realize. But you're particularly focused, not so much, what you're saying is you can have a modern system, but you don't always have a modern application. And so that's something, talk to me about that, because I think that's really the crux of how we're going to do modernization and frankly, have these applications as part of our modern estate.
Yeah, it's important to recognize one of the best things about IBM Z is the code that somebody wrote and compiled 30 years ago still works on IBM Z. And the worst thing about IBM Z is that code that was compiled 30 years ago still runs. There is no other system on the planet that provides that kind of compatibility. And that value has really helped our clients. But if you think about it, what I wrote 30 years ago probably doesn't follow today's architectural standards. No. It's a little different. And probably many other applications, many other modules, other additions have been added over time. And so really you have this big monolith that has developed over time. And due to processes and practices, you keep growing it a little bit at a time. And then you get really worried because you don't have any idea what's connected to what. You've got people accessing the data that you never intended to be accessing the data directly because it was just so easy to do.
Let's talk a bit about that refactoring, because I think you've got some technology to help there. Because at the moment we've got like UI elements written in COBOL, and that's probably not a good idea in 2020. Like, how do we sort of begin to decompose and rethink, what we should be running as transactional logic, on Z? How do we go about doing that? And one of the things that I think is always very valuable there is when people say don't do it. Like in tech, we're always like, oh, we're great, do everything on our platform. There are things that you would clearly say to the customer, no, let's understand this application. There are things that should not be written in this language. So how do customers deal with that? How do you help them with that?
So we have ADDI, which is our product to help you with application understanding. And it really does give you that understanding of all the dependencies, all of the interaction, all the different parts that talk to each other. How is the data being interacted with? What is this monolith? And what is this picture? It helps you understand all those screens that are still part of that application that really don't belong. And you made a really good point. One of the things, I'm a Z bigot. I love Z. You can tell I love Z, but everything doesn't belong in ZOS. Now, I might want to run it in Linux on Z. I might want to run it, or I might need to run it in the public cloud because it needs to be next to the user. I might be pulling social data together. I may want it out there in the environment. So I've got to be able to understand which pieces belong where. And when I think of that backend system, the high transaction throughput, the guaranteed reliability, the system of record, that data, that security requirements, the thing that has to always be up for the credit card swipe, that belongs on ZOS in the data center on that platform. However, the rest of the stuff, like the UI, please take it out of COBOL. COBOL UI 3270, that's not really what anyone wants to see anymore. So we need to split that out. And so understanding that, the other problem is, unfortunately, many applications have business logic in the middle of that UI. And so understanding that and being able to pull it out. And we have modern tools like IBM Developer for Z that help you refactor and pull out functions so that you can really get rid of that part, create a set of services with ZOS Connect, and then use a modern UI where it belongs.
Well, we had SOA, we had microservices. Mainframe is having to be part of that. It's funny, I said there were two things. Modernizing the system, modernizing the application, but of course there's also a question about modernizing the people. So when you mention dev tools, like to me, when I think about modern software developers, and like they're all like, I want to use, we've just seen explosive interest around like Visual Studio Code. As a lightweight code editor, people really like it, and it's like, I want to be using code, I want to be using GitHub, and I want to be using Slack, and I don't really want to be anywhere else. Like, how do you talk to those folks? Because the younger developers, even if they are going to become interested in the environments you're talking about, and we'll get to that in a sec, how do you meet them where they are?
So Git runs on ZOS. Why not? I can use Git as my source code manager. It just handles files, and source code is source code is source code. So from a SCM standpoint, just use Git, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, Azure DevOps. I don't care, whichever one works for you. So that's the first piece. But you mentioned a lot of the others. The pipelines, use whatever pipeline works. The one place we have this difference, we actually need an editor that understands COBOL or PL1. And so we have the IBM Open Editor. It's available from the marketplace. Go download it. You can do all of your development with that. It's open, it's free, sort of, no support. go download, go use, whatever. We also provide it as part of the WASI developer or WASI developer for Red Hat Code Ready workspaces, if we want to use the long name.
We love our product names, don't we? They're so great. We
don't love our product names. IBM and product names, yes, that's a totally different story.
Indeed.
WASI Developer gives you the VS Code capability or Eclipse Che, so you can run it literally in a container in your OpenShift environment. And there you go. The modern IDE is there for you with debug, user build, all those things that you would expect fully integrated into a pipeline.
Okay, that's. I mean, I think that. As I say, that's obviously what modern developers would expect to see. I do think that Eric Gamma. I mean, it's pretty incredible that he built Eclipse and then he went and built Code, and like the work he's done on Code around language extensions and stuff has just been so great for the industry. So, hats off there to him and his team. So yeah, modernizing the people. One thing is to meet them where they are in terms of the tooling they expect. The other one is how do we refresh this? So if I'm like Bank of America or State Street or whoever it is, where I need to find people, I think IBM, they've got a program that I've sort of kept an eye on over the years called Master the Mainframe. It's kind of interesting. You get these like 18-year-old kids and they're excited about like system programming. Like what is that pipeline doing? And how important is that in, as we say, in like 2020, when organizations, we've had this, statements from Microsoft saying 3 years of digital transformation in 3 months. So assuming that the mainframe has some of those pressures, how are you going about, bringing in and exciting a new generation of developers to start using this new tooling?
Master the mainframe is one of the things that we have. And when you say 18, you might not necessarily be in the right age range. Yes, a bunch of college kids do it too, but it's going down to high school. It's going all over. It's the wide range of kids who want to go play. And I know I'm not supposed to call them kids, but whatever words you want to use.
Young people.
Young people. Whatever the right word is. The next generation of developers. We want to
don't they call them Gen Z? Gen Z for System Z.
What? Yes, I actually have a Gen Z child, but we're after that. We're I don't know what generation we are now, but this group of people, we want to capture them. And with the Master the Mainframe this year, we actually are using the open editor and the experience. So they're getting to use Git, they're using the open editor, they're using that experience, they're using all these modern tools to work with this existing system. We have the academic initiative, we have all sorts of things that have been done to help more people understand. But I think the Master the Mainframe as a hackathon, as a challenge, has just gotten interest. And this year, with our transition to the open tooling, really has made a difference because it's easier. I'm not making someone learn ISPF to do something. Yep. I can use all those tools I'm used to.
Okay. So I mean, it's funny. Yeah, I said 18 and you're like, they're both younger and older. So let's not, focus on that. But I mean, I think that there are some interesting shifts as well, though. Like one of the questions to me when when we first met, Rosalind, and you were like, this is for DevOps. And for me, I'm like, DevOps is, it's a number of like overlapping disciplines. You've got like cross-functional teams. You've got the idea of, if you build it, then, and it breaks, then you fix it. So sort of monitoring and troubleshooting becomes part of the mix. And also some different expectations. I think in the mainframe in its pomp, we had an idea we would build an application that wouldn't break. With DevOps, is a bit more of the idea an application will break, and you're taking a different attitude to resilience. But one thing I found interesting is that one of the things we're seeing from like the dev hipsters out there is they're talking about like testing in production. And so it's like, oh yeah, you're never going to have your test environment is going to be the same as your production environment. So you should test in production. What do you say to that as a DevOps idea?
I say, can we stop saying those words? Because it's freaking a lot of people out. So it depends on what you mean. I think one of the things that's happened when we're talking about testing in production, we're not actually talking about taking code and throwing it in production. I've done my unit test first. I've done this testing to make sure the code does what I expect it to do. And then I'm experimenting with function in production to see if this is the valuable thing the users want to do. I'm doing a new marketing play. I'm experimenting with a new way of interacting with the system. I'm experimenting with a brand new function. That is not testing in production. Please stop saying testing in production. But yes, I understand. It's experimentation in production. But we need to have this shift. We need to have this shift left of unit testing and that automated testing first to make that make sense. Right. The reason I freak out and the reason I think many enterprise customers look at the idea of testing in production is, think about it this way. Your bank account balance. Do you care if it's right?
Well, I certainly do, but it's a funny debate about, and there's two characters in particular in the industry, and like one always says, be kind to your teams, never ship code on a Friday afternoon. And then the opposing view is, come on, if you've done all of the testing, you always should be ready to ship. You should have the processes in place, agility and everything else. But of course, not everybody is like that. Most enterprises aren't. And certainly for me, yes, I do want my bank account to have the right numbers in it. There's no doubt about that. So going back to that idea of as I say, better troubleshooting and the monitoring, there are more modern monitoring approaches. We're kind of talking about observability. So at the moment, to me, your DevOps story is very testing centric, which I think is great, because to me, CI/CD is like, that's the basis of everything good in modern software development and delivery. But we're going to have monitoring, things like integration with maybe PagerDuty. That's a big part of DevOps. When do we get that? And where is Z on that journey in terms of the work that you're doing?
So I might say, you mean the rest of the world's finally catching up to us? Automated operations.
I've heard statements like that from Z people a lot. Yeah, sure.
Sorry. Automated operations has been a thought process. Lights out operations has been a thought process in Z for decades. So the idea of automating the system is normal. It is what people do. The interesting catch is we haven't necessarily done it in a friendly way. And so we have the tooling to run a lights out operation. We have the automation capability in the system
I've heard statements like that from Z people a lot.
To do automated processing, to fix things, to do things like integration to PagerDuty or whatever your notification system is. And we've had that for years, but it's been done in the Z way. And one of the problems we have is, since it's so been done in the Z way, it's not as friendly, and we don't use terms that are the same as the rest of the world.
It's its own language on Z. That's definitely one of the things.
And so what we have to do is, one, switch our language where it's appropriate, where we can. Do infrastructure as code. In a sense, we could have been doing that a long time, but we never called it infrastructure as code. We didn't put it in the SCM. We didn't do, let's just take those practices and principles, and they're applied in Z as well. We're bringing AI ops into Z to make it easier. You can do GitOps with Z. There's no reason you can't. We're also bringing things like Python and Ansible and other things that are more normal in the rest of the world to the ZOS world. Now, I got to be a little careful. I'm talking ZOS. If you look at the Linux on Z world, it's all there already anyway. I mean, we've got OpenShift there, so you can do things just like you do everywhere else. ZOS, we're working there. We're doing the things that don't break the value, because ZOS has value. It is a system that I can densely pack applications onto and use Workload Manager to ensure the right workload runs when it should. That doesn't exist anywhere else. So there are some some things there that are different, and they're going to be different because that's the value of the platform. We have Sysplex. I can keep something up 24/7. I can keep things up for years without ever going down because of the platform, not having to write all that code in an application.
Yeah, I mean, that all makes sense to me. I mean, that wall of automation. But as I say, I do think that one of the things about modern DevOps is definitely it's those social aspects. So we're going to be troubleshooting. You can say things won't break for years, but if we're going to have more velocity and make more changes to the applications on Z, then we're likely to get more issues that need remediating. So the human touch in terms of the applications that are deployed there, I think is important if we're going to meet velocity. And that's one of the things, Rosalind, that we're talking about so much in the industry at large now is developer velocity. And it's the job of technology providers to help support that. And one of the things about developer velocity is, more changes means more likelihood of breaking changes. Even though with all the testing in the world, in fact, if you look at the research from the DevOps Research Assessment, organizations that do more changes have fewer outages because they're doing more testing. All that said, dealing with exceptions and unknown unknowns, that is definitely a thing that we need to help people with.
And having integration to Slack, to whatever your technology is the kind of thing that people are doing today. I can get that automation. I mean, it was a while ago, somebody was integrating voice into Slack, into Z system automation to understand the status, to get the errors, to be able to do things. And they're all those kinds of things that we do anywhere else. We can also do on Z. And get that information. And the one issue in that space is, though, that knowledge base. We have a lot of very experienced system programmers, but I want that 20-something or that 14-something to be able to play with the system. I need that kind of experience. One of the things that we've done through the Master the Mainframe and other programs is make Z more accessible early on. But we also have, as part of the WASI developer, the ability to spin up a sandbox. And so within organizations, they can spin up a true ZOS environment in Intel, OpenShift environment, and let people play and learn these management tools, learn the system and experiment and do those things. Because if me as a developer never actually have access to that ZOS system to do anything, I'm never really going to learn it. I can play, I can break it, throw it away, spin up another one. Do all those things to actually play and experiment and learn, which is the way I learn.
Well, I love that, bringing some of that disposability to what we're doing here, because frankly, that's one of the things we've seen the whole container revolution is very much about spin something up, throw it away, start again. It's all immutable, and very much disposability is a watchword. And to your point, it makes it easier to play. Okay, so we've talked about the system, the application, the people. I think we've talked about pretty much all the things. 2020 people have short attention spans. So I think that we should probably sign off now. But, for me, it's just always a pleasure to talk to people that are passionate, super knowledgeable, that are, in your own words, I think bigots about their technology, but certainly passionate. So are there any, wrapping up from your perspective, are there any last things that either I guess two questions. What would you say to a young developer about why they should, play with the tools you're creating? Or what would you say to an enterprise about why they should be investing? And what would you say to an enterprise about why they should take another look at this stuff in terms of them moving forward as a business when there are so many other options they have for digital transformation and moving forward as a software driven business?
Well, to that young person, I'll say when I started in IBM, how many ever years ago, 33 years ago, the mainframe was going away. We have IBM Z We have Z. It is still the core backbone for the world, and it will stay that way because of the qualities of service. So if you want to have an opportunity to have a long career and be able to do something that is valuable and productive for society, IBM Z is a platform to know. From a company standpoint, it runs your business today. It has that value for you today. Use it for what it's good for. Tie it into your hybrid cloud strategy. Make sure it's the part that does that high throughput transaction reliability, guaranteed security, pervasive encryption, all of those things for you. And, put that other stuff where it belongs. I don't need a UI sitting there. Make sure you're using the platform for the values it has, and don't treat it like a dinosaur. Don't treat it like that old thing. It is the most modern hardware. Take advantage of the system that it is today.
I can't believe you used the D word. Now everybody, that's like, don't think of an elephant. You made him think of the D. But there you go. Anyway, that was great. Super good to talk to you. It was a lot of fun. I think we may well be having another one of these conversations because you're going to be moving forward. There's going to be new functionality. That is all awesome. But basically, Rosalind, thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks everyone for watching. And there'll be more conversations like this to come. So have a great day and thank you again.